The world had become nothing but white death and screaming wind. Charlotte Harker no longer felt her feet. Her boot soles, worn through after 2 years breaking this unforgiving land, had become blocks of ice encasing flesh she could no longer claim as her own. Each step through drifts that swallowed her to the thigh was a separate agony. Yet she pushed forward because stopping meant surrender, and surrender meant her children would die in this howling emptiness. Baby Anna hung silent against her chest, wrapped in every scrap of cloth Charlotte could spare. That silence terrified her more than screaming ever could. The infant's face had gone the color of old ash lips, tinged with a blue-purple that spoke of cold, working its way toward her tiny heart. Charlotte pressed cracked, bleeding lips to her daughter's forehead and found only terrible stillness, not quite death, but its approaching shadow. Behind her, 9-year-old Henry fought through the same impossible snow, his narrow shoulders so achingly like his father's, shaking with each cough that tore from deep in his chest. The sound was wet, rattling wrong in every way a mother's ear could recognize. When the fit finally released him, he straightened with eyes glazed by fever and a face paler than the storm surrounding them. 6-year-old Amos clung to her skirt with small hands that had stopped shaking 10 minutes ago, a bad sign Charlotte knew with dull horror. His bare fingers had turned the color of candle wax, stiff and unresponsive. The mittens were gone, lost somewhere in the first hour when they'd fled the burning cabin. Charlotte had lost all sense of time. The sun, if it still existed beyond this fury, gave no hint of position. There was only the eternal present of cold and wind and the animal knowledge that her body was dying by degrees. Behind them, how far now? A mile, too. The ruins of their homestead sent black smoke into white sky. Pike's riders had thrown their torches and ridden away, laughing their voices, carrying like carry-on birds over a fresh kill. Her left cheek throbbed where Sheriff Harry Hatchet had struck her, splitting the skin below her eye with the back of his leather glove. Blood had frozen there in a dark crust that cracked with every movement. "Mama." Henry's voice emerged, strangled, dissolving into coughing that bent him double. He dropped to his knees in a drift body, convulsing as he fought for air. Terror cut through Charlotte's numbness like a blade. She turned, but her legs betrayed her, and she fell sideways into snow. Anna's weight pulled her off balance. Amos collapsed against her back, shaking with sobs she could feel, but not hear. This is how we die, Charlotte understood with sudden clarity. Kneeling here while the cold stops our hearts like clocks wound down, she tried to pray. She tried to. Her lips moved, but produced nothing. She had prayed when Dorian died beneath that too convenient collapse. She had prayed when Pike's forged papers arrived. She had prayed when flames consumed everything. The silence from heaven had been absolute. Then through the white wall, a figure appeared. Charlotte blinked hard, certain her dying mind was conjuring phantoms. But the shape remained solid, stepping toward them through the blizzard as though wind and ice were mere inconvenience. A man, tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in buckskin with long fringe whipping in the gale. His long black hair flew unbound around a face of sharp angles and copper skin. Eagle feathers crusted with ice adorned his head. In his hands, a rifle. A Lakota warrior. Here. Now. Every tale Charlotte had heard roared through her mind: savagery, captivity, children, stolen cruelties whispered in locked houses after dark. But Henry was dying this moment. Amos's fingers were already lost. Anna might have slipped beyond reach. The warrior stopped one arm's length away. His dark eyes swept over them. Then deliberately he extended his right hand. His palm was bare despite the cold, scarred, steady as stone. "Come with me," he said in clear English. "Or the storm takes you, all of you." Not a plea. Just facts stated with certainty. One might note that fire burned. Charlotte stared at his hand. Terror and need warred in her chest. But Henry coughed again, a sound like wet cloth tearing, and her body moved before thought could interfere. She reached for Henry. Her numb fingers slipped. She stumbled. The warrior's hand caught her wrist firm but not painful and steadied her. Then he bent and lifted Henry as though the boy weighed nothing, cradling him with hands that knew how to hold fragile things. "Your others," he said, nodding toward Amos and Anna. "Can they walk?" Charlotte managed a nod. "Then follow. Close. Do not fall behind." He turned toward trees barely visible through white chaos. Charlotte grabbed Amos's wrist and followed, every instinct screaming she was trading one death for another. But the alternative was kneeling in that drift until cold claimed them. That was not a choice at all. The warrior moved with startling speed, despite drifts finding paths Charlotte could not perceive. She struggled to keep pace, half carrying Amos, feeling Anna's terrible stillness with every lurching step. When they reached the tree line, wind's fury lessened enough to breathe without lungs burning. The warrior wove between snow-laden pines with absolute certainty, never hesitating. Once Charlotte's boot caught on a hidden root and she pitched forward. She lay tasting blood and ice, certain she could not rise. Then Amos's hand tugged her coat, and shame gave strength where determination had failed. She pushed up bark, scraping raw palms, and found the warrior had stopped ahead, waiting in silence. She staggered upright. He turned and walked on. The forest thickened. Charlotte's world narrowed to following tracks, watching dark fringe on his coat, putting one impossible foot before the other. Finally, the trees opened into a sheltered hollow. 2 hide lodges stood in the center, conical structures, venting thin smoke. 3 ponies stamped beneath a lean-to. The warrior pushed through the entrance flap. Charlotte followed. Warmth struck like a physical blow. She caught herself against hide wall, blinking as ice-crusted eyes adjusted. A fire burned in the center. Buffalo robes lined the walls. Wood smoke and cured hide and cooking meat filled the air. 2 people moved inside, a younger man with a scarred jaw, an elderly woman whose face was a map of wrinkles. They spoke rapidly in Lakota as the warrior laid Henry on furs near the fire. The young man checked the boy's breathing. The old woman came toward Charlotte with hands outstretched. Instinct made Charlotte's arms tighten around Anna. The old woman stopped, met her eyes, spoke one word: help. The certainty in that single syllable made Charlotte's arms loosen. The old woman took Anna, carefully pressing the infant against her warm chest beneath layers of wool. She began murmuring in Lakota, rhythmic and soothing. The young man stripped Henry's wet clothing, wrapped him in buffalo robe. He checked pulse breathing, spoke to the warrior with concern. "You," the old woman said sharply to Charlotte. "Sit." Charlotte sat because her legs gave out. Amos collapsed into her lap, shaking violently. The old woman pressed a horn cup into Charlotte's hands. "Drink." Charlotte brought it to Amos's lips first. Rich bone broth, thick with fat. She made him finish half, then drank herself, feeling warmth spread through her chest. The warrior stood and moved toward the entrance, rifle in hand. His companion called something in Lakota. The warrior answered curtly and pushed through the flap. Charlotte sat frozen-mind, catching up. She was inside a Lakota lodge. Her children were being tended by Indians. Everything she'd been taught said this was impossible, dangerous, a trap. And yet, Anna's lips were regaining color. Henry's breathing was steadying. Amos had stopped shaking. The old woman caught Charlotte's gaze and held it. Then nodded once, slow, deliberate, waited. Acknowledgement. Recognition. Charlotte nodded back, throat too tight for words. Outside, the storm howled. Inside, the fire crackled, children breathed, and somewhere between terror and hope, Charlotte closed her eyes and let herself believe they might survive until morning. The storm raged through the night. Charlotte drifted in and out of exhausted sleep, jerking awake when children stirred. Each time she found the old woman Winona, she learned when the younger man spoke her name, watching with tireless vigilance. The younger man was Nahiosi. He moved with quiet competence, checking children, adding wood, precisely melting snow in a copper pot. As gray dawn light filtered through hide walls, Charlotte forced herself awake. Her body ached beyond description. Her palms were raw meat, wrapped in blood-crusted bandages Winona must have applied while she slept. But she was alive. Her children were alive. Henry lay beside her, breathing easier. Amos slept curled against her. Anna rested in Winona's lap, no longer gray, but rosy. The entrance flap moved, and the warrior entered, bringing cold air and fresh snow. His dark eyes swept the lodge fire, each child finally Charlotte. "The storm is ending," he said. "By afternoon the wind will stop. You are strong enough to speak." Charlotte nodded. "Good." He sat cross-legged across the fire, laying his rifle within reach. Nahiosi handed him something in a wooden bowl. The warrior ate mechanically, fueling his body like one might feed a horse before a long ride. When finished, he set the bowl aside and fixed her with an unreadable gaze. "We must understand what brought you to open prairie in a killing storm with 3 small children." He waited patient as stone. Charlotte drew a breath that hurt and began. Her name was Charlotte Harker née Brennan, 26 years old, widowed, 6 months past. She and Dorian had claimed their homestead along Bear Creek in spring 1870, 160 acres, under the Homestead Act of 1862. The land was good. Water ran year-round. Timber grew thick. Soil was rich enough for wheat and corn if you worked it. Dorian had been a carpenter by trade, trained in Philadelphia, skilled with wood in ways bordering on artistry. They'd built a sound cabin, a strong barn planned for the future. Last spring, surveyors came marking boundaries for a railroad spur connecting mining camps to the main transcontinental line. The route cut close to their property within a quarter mile. Reginald Pike owned the largest ranch in the territory, thousands of acres acquired through purchase foreclosure, strategic marriage, and methods that didn't bear examination. Pike wanted every piece of land along that railroad corridor. Pike came himself to make the offer, $50 for their 160 acres. A calculated insult. Perhaps 1/10 the land's worth. Dorian had refused politely but firmly. Pike's expression hadn't changed. But something shifted behind his eyes, cold, patient, final. "Accidents happen to men who make poor choices, Mr. Harker," he'd said pleasantly. Then he'd ridden away. 2 weeks later, Dorian died when the barn roof collapsed while he worked alone inside. Pike's men arrived within an hour somehow. Among them was Sheriff Harry Hatchett, limping on his war-damaged leg cane, tapping frozen ground. They'd called it an accident. Rotten timber? Bad luck. Charlotte hadn't believed it. Dorian knew timber the way other men knew their children. He would never work beneath an unsafe structure. But she'd had no proof, no witnesses. Harry wrote his report, accidental death by structural collapse. No foul play suspected. A month after the funeral, Harry came back with legal papers. Dorian had borrowed $200 from Pike, the documents claimed using land as collateral. The debt was due with interest. Total owed $284, impossible to raise. Charlotte had shown Harry her original land grant. No mention of Pike, no debt. Harry had smiled thinly. His voice had been almost gentle. "Legal matters are complicated for a widow without a man to guide her, Mrs. Harker. Best let Mr. Pike handle the property before more unfortunate accidents occur. For the children's sake." The threat could not have been clearer. But Charlotte had 3 children, no family west of Pennsylvania, no money for lawyers, and her father's stubborn Irish blood. She told Harry the land was hers by federal law and ordered him off her property. Harry's smile had widened fractionally. Something had flickered in his eyes, not quite satisfaction, not quite regret. "You have 1 week to reconsider," he'd said. "After that, legal proceedings will move forward." Pike's riders came 6 nights ago, 4 of them, including Harry, all armed. They'd given Charlotte 1 hour to pack and leave. When she'd refused, standing in her doorway citing the Homestead Act and federal law, one of them, a young man with a scarred nose, had backhanded her hard enough to split her cheek and knock her sprawling before her screaming children. While she'd lain bleeding on her porch, another rider had kicked over the kerosene lantern in the barn doorway. Oil spilled. Flame caught and raced through the structure like something alive, consuming everything Dorian had built. Charlotte had noticed something in that moment. Harry had turned his horse away sharply, not watching the fire. His knuckles were white on his reins. His jaw had worked as though chewing words he couldn't speak. But the other men had laughed, and Harry had said nothing. Henry had screamed for his father. Amos had screamed in wordless terror. Anna had wailed. Charlotte had grabbed her children and run into gathering darkness, taking nothing but clothes and one thing she'd hidden weeks earlier, a torn page from Pike's account book, stolen during a visit to his ranch, secreted in her Bible. The page listed expenses in Pike's neat, copperplate 2 crates dynamite, extra clearing, BC homestead dated the week Dorian died. Below that, H. Harry, contract settled, clean. Not a confession, but a pattern. Dynamite with no legitimate purpose. Money to the sheriff marked with telling brevity. Dates too precise for coincidence. "I ran," Charlotte said, voice flattening. "I thought if I could reach Stone Bridge, find a federal judge or territorial marshal not on Pike's payroll, someone would listen. Someone would care he'd murdered my husband and tried to burn my children alive." She looked at her raw hands. "I didn't think about the storm coming. I just knew staying meant dying." The warrior had listened without expression. Now he sat silent, staring at the fire. Then he spoke to Winona in Lakota, voice low. The old woman responded at length, tone carrying weight of old bitterness. Nahiosi added quiet words. The warrior nodded, then looked back at Charlotte. "My name is Kangji," he said. "This means raven, the bird that survives winter when others die. Some white men call me Dusk Runner because I travel at twilight and they never see me coming." He gestured. "This is my cousin Nahiosi. This is Winona, my mother's sister, who raised me after disease took my parents when I was 8 winters old." He paused. "You fled from men who burned your home and threatened your children. You need give us no explanation. We understand fire used as weapon. We understand men who take land that doesn't belong to them." Something dark moved behind his eyes. "We have known these things longer than your people have been in this territory." Kangji leaned forward. Firelight carved shadows across his face. "But you must understand your situation clearly, Mrs. Harker. Pike's men will search for you. When they don't find bodies near your burned cabin, they'll look farther. They'll be methodical, patient." He let that settle. "If they find you here with us, they won't ask whether you came willingly or whether we offered help from kindness. They'll say we took you captive, kidnapped a white woman and her children. That becomes their justification for actions they already want to take, burning our lodges, killing our families, claiming we're savages who can't be trusted." His eyes held hers. "This has happened before. It will happen again. Your presence here endangers everyone in this camp." Ice washed through Charlotte's chest. She'd been so focused on survival, she hadn't considered the danger she brought these people. "I'll leave," she said immediately. "As soon as the children can travel. I won't bring Pike's violence to your family after you saved our lives. You'll bring trouble wherever you go, Kangji said with brutal honesty. Pike has decided your land belongs to him. Men like Pike don't yield. They don't forget. They don't stop until they possess what they want, or someone forces them to stop. He paused. The only question is what you intend to do about that. Charlotte looked at her sleeping children, at this warm lodge that had sheltered them, at the three faces watching her. I don't know, she admitted. I have one torn page from his account book. No witnesses willing to testify he owns half the territory. No proof that would stand in court against his lawyers and money. Then you need witnesses who will speak despite fear, Kangji said, and proof that cannot be dismissed. He glanced at Winona. Some silent communication passed between them. The old woman nodded. There is a man in Stone Bridge, Kangji said. Dr. Evander Klaus. He came from your Philadelphia 10 years ago, bringing medicine and education. He has no love for men like Pike. Kangji's jaw tightened. 3 winters ago, when soldiers at Fort Laramie refused to treat our children during fever sickness, said their medicine was only for white families, Dr. Klaus rode 2 days through cold to reach our winter camp. He treated 14 children, asking nothing in return. 5 lived because of him. Something softened in his face. If anyone in Stone Bridge would listen to a widow's testimony against a powerful rancher, it's Dr. Klaus. He knows what injustice looks like. He has chosen to fight it before. Stone Bridge is 2 days' travel in good weather, Charlotte said quietly. 2 days in summer with healthy travelers on good horses. 3 or 4 days now in winter on foot with sick children and men hunting you. His gaze was steady. And Pike's men are already searching. Charlotte looked at her children again, then back at Kangji. Why would you help us reach Stone Bridge? Why risk yourself and your family for people you don't know, for a white woman whose people have? She couldn't finish. The history was too large, too terrible. Kangji's jaw clenched. He looked away toward the fire, and when he spoke, his voice was barely audible. 4 winters ago, during a blizzard like the one that nearly killed you, my younger sister walked half a day through storm trying to reach a settler's cabin near Sweetwater River. Her name was Makawi. She was 10 years old. His hands curled into fists. She knew the country better than most grown men. She made it to that cabin, knocked on the wooden plank he called a door. He stopped, swallowed hard, continued. The settler heard her. He admitted this later when others asked why he did nothing. He said he thought it was a trick, that she had friends hiding in the storm waiting to rob him if he opened up, that letting her inside would waste his firewood. Kangji's voice cracked. We found her at dawn, frozen 10 feet from his porch, one small hand still reaching toward wood that stayed closed. She had laughed like water running over stones. She could track a rabbit through grass and never lose the trail. And she died begging mercy from a man too afraid to give it. Silence filled the lodge except for fire's crackle and wind's distant moan. I am tired, Kangji whispered. Tired of fear that kills children. Tired of people who could help but choose safety over kindness. He raised his eyes to Charlotte's, and she saw grief that mirrored her own, raw and endless. If I can prevent one more child from freezing while someone sits warm and safe, I will. That is the only reason I need. Charlotte looked at this man, this stranger, whose people had every reason to hate hers, who had chosen mercy anyway, and felt something fundamental shift in her understanding of the world. How far to Stone Bridge? She asked quietly. 3 days if weather holds and your son's lungs clear. 4 if we must move slowly. Charlotte looked at Henry, at Amos, at Anna sleeping in Winona's arms. at the impossible journey ahead. Then we leave when Henry can breathe well enough to walk. Kangji nodded one sharp final. Tomorrow at first light, if his chest is clear. Tonight we prepare. He rose and left through the entrance flap, cold air swirling in his wake. Winona looked at Charlotte for a long moment. Then, in careful English, "He is good man. Lost too much. Angry at world, but helps anyway." She adjusted Anna's blanket. "You lost too much also. Maybe you understand each other. Maybe that is why you both still try when trying seems like madness." Charlotte had no answer. She sat staring at the fire, trying to imagine a path forward that didn't end in more death. Over the next hours, Charlotte learned to prepare for winter travel in country that showed no mercy to the unprepared. Nahiosi demonstrated packing supplies, every item chosen for absolute necessity and minimal weight. Dried venison in oiled cloth. Pemmican made from pounded meat. Dried berries rendered fat so calorie-dense that a handful could sustain you through a day's hard travel. Parched corn. Rawhide strips for emergency repairs. Flint and steel in waxed canvas. A small hatchet with razor-sharp edge. Winona prepared a poultice for Henry's chest using herbs. Charlotte didn't recognize sage, certainly, and something else sharp and medicinal that made her eyes water. The old woman crushed the herbs with practiced efficiency, mixed them with animal fat, spread the paste across cloth before pressing it to Henry's thin chest. Almost immediately, the boy's breathing seemed to ease, congestion loosening. Winona also fashioned a sling for Anna from soft hide and woven fiber, showing Charlotte how to strap the baby against her chest in a way that left both hands free, while keeping Anna warm against her body heat. Amos crept closer to Nahiosi, fascinated by the whetstone the young man used to sharpen a skinning knife with smooth, hypnotic strokes. Nahiosi noticed, smiled slightly, the first smile Charlotte had seen from him, and handed Amos a small dull blade and piece of soft pine. Without words, he demonstrated how to carve with the grain, how to let the wood tell you where it wanted to split. Amos bent over the task, with fierce concentration, tongue caught between his teeth, fear momentarily forgotten in focus. Charlotte watched her children begin to breathe again, not just physically, but in some deeper sense, and felt something frozen in her chest crack slightly. That evening, as winter's sun set early, and darkness claimed the hollow, Kangji returned. His face was grim. He spoke without preamble. Fresh tracks in the snow half a mile east. 3 riders moving in search pattern, organized, systematic. They didn't see this camp, but they're working methodically. Charlotte's stomach clenched. Pike's men. 1 horse leaves a crooked print in the rear. Left the hoof is chipped or malformed. The rider dismounts heavy on one side, leaving deep marks where his weight settles. Kangji's eyes held hers. That's how your Sheriff Harry rides, yes, because of his war wound. Charlotte nodded slowly. Bullet shattered his hip at Shiloh. He walks with a cane when not mounted. His left leg can't bear full weight. Then Harry's out there hunting you. And he won't stop until he finds something. Kangji's gaze moved to Henry, who was sitting up now, sipping broth, color returning to his face. We leave before dawn. Your son, can he travel? Charlotte assessed Henry honestly. Fever reduced, but not gone. Lungs clearer, but still fragile. He would need to walk miles through snow and cold. He'll have to, she said quietly. He's survived this long. We don't stop now. Kangji nodded. Rest while you can. We move when stars are still bright. That night, Charlotte lay beside her children, listening to wind diminish from shriek to whisper. The storm was ending, which meant clear weather tomorrow. Clear weather for tracking. Across the lodge, Kangji sat with rifle across his knees, eyes open, watching the entrance. Twice during the long night, their gazes met across firelight. Neither spoke, just shared understanding of 2 people who had lost what could not be replaced and refused to lose more. When sleep finally came, Charlotte dreamed of Dorian. Not as he'd been at the end, crushed beneath fallen timber, but as he'd been in Philadelphia before they'd married, before they'd come west, before pike and death and flames. He was laughing at something she'd said, his carpenter's hands busy with wood, creating beauty from raw material. She woke to Kanji's hand on her shoulder, his touch gentle but firm. "It's time, Mrs. Harker." Outside darkness still reigned, but stars shone hard and cold overhead in a clear sky. The storm had passed. Nahiosi had lashed together a crude sled from lodge poles and rawhide strips. Winona pressed bundles of food into Charlotte's hands, speaking rapidly in Lakota. Kanji translated. She says, "Keep your children close and warm. Don't trust white men who smile with too many teeth. If you're alone in cold, again remember, fire comes before shelter, before food, before everything. Fire first, always." Charlotte nodded, throat too tight for speech. She wanted to express gratitude for these people, who owed her nothing and gave her everything. But words felt insufficient. Winona seemed to understand. She touched Charlotte's cheek gently just below the split skin where Harry had struck her. "Strong," Winona said in English, the word firm and certain. "Like stone in river. Water comes and comes, but stone stays. You stay." Charlotte caught Winona's wrinkled hand and squeezed it, then turned before her composure could break entirely. Kanji checked the sled's lashings, tugging ropes to test strength. Henry stood beside Charlotte, wrapped in a borrowed coat too large, insisting he could walk. Charlotte tied a wool scarf around his neck and pulled his hat low over his ears. "We move quickly and quietly," Kanji said, voice low and serious. "Stay close to me. If I stop, you stop. If I run, you run. If I tell you to hide, you hide immediately without question or argument. Understand?" Everyone nodded. "Good." Kanji picked up the rope attached to the sled. He looked at Charlotte one last time, and something passed between them. Acknowledgement, perhaps, or simply shared determination. "Ready, Mrs. Harker?" "No," Charlotte said honestly. "But we're going anyway." Something that might have been a ghost of a smile crossed Kanji's face. Then he turned and began walking into the darkness, and Charlotte followed him into the trees with her children, and nothing but hope that dawn would find them still alive and free. They moved through pre-dawn darkness in silence, broken only by snow crunching underfoot and occasional wind whispers through pines. Kanji led with the sled rope tied around his waist, following paths invisible to Charlotte, game trails perhaps, or simply knowledge earned from a lifetime spent reading this land's subtle language. He wove between trees around rock formations, through narrow gaps where branches hung low and heavy with snow. Charlotte followed as closely as she dared, one hand gripping Henry's shoulder, the other supporting Anna in her sling. Amos rode on the sled, huddled beneath buffalo robes, his wide eyes the only part of him visible. Every step was effort. Charlotte's legs ached from the previous day's ordeal. Her torn palms burned where the makeshift bandages rubbed against raw flesh. Exhaustion sat on her shoulders like physical weight, pressing her down toward earth. But she kept walking. Because Kanji kept walking. Because her children needed her. Because Pike had left no other choice. Dawn came slowly, gray light, seeping between trees like water through cloth. As visibility improved, Kanji increased their pace, driven by urgency. Charlotte could feel radiating from him like heat from a stove. They climbed steadily the ground, rising toward ridges that would take them north toward Stone Bridge, while keeping them hidden from the valley where Pike's men would be searching. The forest changed around them, more spruce now than pine, the air carrying the sharp, clean scent of high country. An hour after sunrise, they reached a narrow creek. Ice covered it entirely, but fresh snow obscured the surface, hiding what lay beneath. Kanji stopped at the bank, studying the crossing carefully. Ice is thick here, he said quietly, not turning around. But there are always weak spots where current runs faster beneath. Step exactly where I step. Watch for dark patches or sounds like hollow cracking. He tested his first step carefully, distributing his weight, listening. Then he moved forward with deliberate slowness. Charlotte followed, placing her boots precisely in his tracks, holding her breath. Behind her, the sled began crossing its runners, scraping across uneven surface. Halfway across, Amos shifted beneath the robes, trying to see. The sled tilted slightly to one side. Ice groaned beneath it, deep, ominous sound that made Charlotte's heart freeze in her chest. "Do not move," Kangji said sharply. Everyone stopped. The groan grew louder, rising from beneath their feet like something waking. A crack appeared thin and dark, spreading from beneath the sled's left runner like black lightning across white sky. Water surged up through the gap, shockingly dark and fast. "Pull!" Kangji shouted. Charlotte spun, dropping to her knees beside the rope. Kangji was already hauling backward with all his strength, boots digging into the snow on the bank, every muscle straining against the weight. Charlotte grabbed the rope beside him and pulled her torn palms, screaming, protest shoulders burning. The sled didn't budge. Ice was breaking beneath it, tilting it downward as the crack widened. More water poured over the runners, soaking into the robes, turning everything impossibly heavy. Amos screamed, high terrified sound that cut through the morning air like a knife. Kangji looped the rope around his forearm for better grip and threw his weight backward, legs driving, boots slipping on snow. Charlotte pulled beside him, their shoulders nearly touching, both fighting against ice and water and physics that wanted to drag Amos down into black current. The sled lurched forward an inch. Another. Ice beneath it shattered completely, huge chunks spinning away downstream beneath the white surface. More water flooded across where the sled had been. Again! Kangji gasped through clenched teeth. They pulled together one final desperate heave that made Charlotte's vision go white with pain. The sled scraped forward onto solid ice, then across it, entirely sliding onto the snowy bank. Amos tumbled out, rolling into deep snow, sobbing but alive. Charlotte collapsed forward, gasping, hands shaking so badly she couldn't unclench them from the rope. Beside her, Kangji staggered, his left leg suddenly buckling beneath him. He caught himself against a tree trunk, jaw clenched tight, and stayed there, breathing hard through his nose. "Are you hurt?" Charlotte managed between gasps. "Old wound. Cavalry bullet 3 years back." His voice was tight with controlled pain. "Cold makes it worse. I'll manage." Charlotte looked at her hands. Blood welled from torn skin where rope had flayed away Winona's careful bandages. She looked at Kangji's leg, saw pain carved into every line of his face, despite his attempt to hide it. They'd been traveling less than 3 hours, and already both were injured. "We need to stop," Charlotte said firmly. "Bind your leg properly before Pike's men catch us." Kangji interrupted, voice flat and hard. "No. We stop when we have shelter and high ground where we can see anyone approaching, not before. You can barely walk. I can walk well enough." He bent to inspect the sled, and his leg nearly buckled again. He caught himself, breathed slowly through obvious pain, straightened. "We keep moving." Charlotte wanted to argue, but Henry chose that moment to double over with a coughing fit, deep, wet sound that bent his thin frame nearly in half. She moved to him instantly, supporting his shoulders, feeling fever building beneath his coat like coals coming back to life. No. Not again. They'd made it through the night. Henry was supposed to be getting better. She pressed her hand to his forehead and felt heat that hadn't been there an hour ago. Kangji watched with concern, sharpening his angular features. "How bad?" Fever. Charlotte said, fear making her voice crack. He needs rest, medicine, warmth. Then we find shelter soon. 1 hour, maybe less. Kanji tested his weight on his injured leg, grimaced, but stayed upright. Can he walk that long? Henry straightened face, pale but determined. I can walk, Mama. Good boy. Charlotte wrapped her arm around his thin shoulders. She looked at Kanji. 1 hour. Then we stop whether it's safe or not. Kanji studied her for a moment, then nodded once. 1 hour. But we must move faster now. They climbed higher into the hills, leaving the creek behind. The forest began to thin as they approached the tree line. Wind picked up, carrying sharp crystals of ice that stung exposed skin. Ahead, Kanji stopped suddenly. Charlotte caught up and saw what had halted him. The forest ended at a cliff edge. Beyond it, nothing but open air and a drop of at least 60 feet to jagged rocks below. The only way forward was along a narrow ledge that ran along the cliff face, barely wide enough for one person to walk carefully. Is there another way? Charlotte asked, voice shaking. Yes. Back down the mountain where Pike's men are waiting. Kanji studied the ledge, calculating. This is dangerous, but it's our only path north. He looked at Charlotte, at her children, and something like apology crossed his face. I'll go first with the sled. You follow with the children. Keep your backs to the rock face. Don't look down. Take small steps. If someone slips... He didn't finish. He didn't need to. Charlotte understood perfectly. If one of them fell, the others couldn't stop to help. They had to keep going, or they would all die. I understand, she whispered. Kanji nodded. He pulled the sled with Amos still clinging to it onto the ledge and began moving sideways, his back pressed to the rock face feet, testing each step before committing weight. Charlotte watched him inch along the ledge, her heart in her throat. Amos's eyes were squeezed shut, his small hands gripping the sled poles with white knuckles. After what felt like an eternity, Kanji reached a wider spot in the ledge and called back. Come across, one at a time. Henry first. Charlotte knelt beside her son. His face was flushed with fever, his eyes glassy. Henry, look at me. Can you walk across that ledge? Henry looked at the narrow path at the drop beyond it, and his face went even paler. But he nodded. Yes, Mama. That's my brave boy. Keep your back to the rock. Don't look down. Just look at Mr. Kangi and walk toward him. Henry stepped onto the ledge. His thin body pressed against the rock face. He began moving sideways, small shuffling steps. Halfway across, his foot slipped on a patch of ice. He gasped arms, windmilling body tilting forward toward empty air. Henry! Charlotte screamed. Kanji moved with shocking speed despite his wounded leg. His hand shot out and caught Henry's arm, yanking the boy back against the rock face. Henry stood frozen, trembling all over, tears streaming down his face. Breathe, Kanji said quietly, his hand steady on Henry's shoulder. You're safe. I have you. Just breathe. Henry took a shuddering breath. Then another. Kanji guided him the rest of the way to the wider section. Your turn, Mrs. Harker, Kanji called. Charlotte looked at Anna, still strapped to her chest in the sling, and felt terror rise like bile in her throat. If she fell, they both died. But staying here meant dying slowly, while Pike's men hunted them down. She stepped onto the ledge. The world immediately narrowed to inches, the rough rock against her back, the narrow stone beneath her feet, the terrible empty space to her right. Wind tugged at her clothes, trying to pull her off balance. Anna squirmed in the sling, and Charlotte pressed one hand against the baby's back, holding her still. She took a step. Another. The stone was slick with ice in places, rough and reliable in others. She tested each foothold before trusting it with her weight. Halfway across, she made the mistake of glancing down. The drop yawned beneath her 60 feet of empty air, ending in rocks sharp as teeth. Her vision spun. Her knees went weak. "Mrs. Harker?" Kanji's voice cut through her panic calm and steady. "Look at me. Only at me." Charlotte dragged her eyes up from the drop and focused on Kanji's face. His dark eyes held hers steady and certain. "Good," he said quietly. "Now, 3 more steps. You can do this." Charlotte took 1 step, 2, 3. Kanji's hand caught her arm and pulled her into the wider section. Her legs gave out and she collapsed against the rock face, gasping. "Well done," Kanji said. And there was respect in his voice, genuine and hard-earned. They rested for a moment, catching their breath. Then Kanji led them off the ledge onto solid ground again. The forest resumed thicker than before, and they pushed into it gratefully. But after only 20 minutes, Kanji stopped again, his body going tense. "What's wrong?" Charlotte asked. "Listen." Charlotte strained her ears. At first, she heard nothing. Then voices again, closer now, and the sound of horses moving fast through trees. They doubled back. Kanji said grimly, "They found our tracks." "How did they?" "Doesn't matter. They're coming." He looked around quickly, calculating options. "See that ravine? We go down into it, follow the bottom north. The walls will hide us." They scrambled down into the ravine, a deep cut in the earth, filled with snow and deadfall. The walls rose 20 feet on either side, steep and rocky. The bottom was narrow, forcing them to move in single file. They'd gone perhaps 200 yards when Kanji stopped abruptly. Ahead, the ravine ended in a wall of rock, a dead end. "No," Charlotte whispered. "No, there has to be another way." "There isn't." Kanji turned, looking back the way they'd come. His face was carved from stone, but Charlotte saw fear in his eyes for the first time. "They'll trap us here. We have to go back, find another path." But it was too late. At the mouth of the ravine, Sheriff Harry appeared on horseback, flanked by his 2 men. They blocked the only exit rifles in hand. Harry looked down at them, and Charlotte saw something complicated move across his face. Not triumph, not satisfaction, but something closer to pain. His hand gripped his reins so tightly, his knuckles showed white. His cane hung from his saddle horn, swinging slightly with his horse's movements. "Mrs. Harker," he called, voice carrying down the ravine. His other hand moved toward his cane, then stopped, trembling slightly. "You've led us on quite a chase, but it's over now. Come peacefully, and nobody gets hurt." Kanji stepped in front of Charlotte, rifle rising to his shoulder in one smooth motion. Harry raised his hand quickly, and Charlotte saw it shake. "Think carefully, Dusk Runner. You fire 1 shot and my men will kill all of you. The woman, the children, everyone. Is that what you want?" "What I want," Kanji said, voice deadly quiet, "is for you to let them pass. This is between Mrs. Harker and Pike. Stand aside." One of Harry's men laughed. "1 Indian with an old rifle against 3 of us, those odds don't favor you, savage." But Harry didn't laugh. He studied Kanji with the eyes of a man who had survived Shiloh and knew what violence looked like. His horse shifted beneath him, and he grimaced, the war wound in his hip clearly paining him. His free hand gripped his cane convulsively. "Lower your weapon," Harry said. But there was something strange in his voice, almost pleading. His hand trembled on the cane. "This doesn't have to end in blood. Just come back with us. Talk to Pike. Work something out." "Pike burns homes and kills husbands," Charlotte said, her voice ringing clear and hard in the ravine. "There's nothing to work out. He wants my land and he'll kill my children to get it." Harry's jaw tightened. Something flickered across his face. Pain, perhaps, or conflict. His hand moved toward his cane again, gripping it as though it were the only thing keeping him from falling apart. For a moment, Charlotte saw something in his eyes that looked almost like shame. But then, one of his men spoke. "Enough talking. Pike wants them back, and he's paying good money. We take them now." The man raised his rifle, pointing it directly at Kanji. And Harry did something that shocked everyone. He swung his cane sideways with surprising speed, knocking the rifle barrel aside hard before the man could fire. "No shooting," he said sharply, voice carrying authority that brooked no argument. "Pike wants them alive." The ranch hand stared at him. "Harry, what in hell?" "I said no shooting." Harry's voice was steel, though his cane trembled violently in his grip now. He looked at Charlotte, and his eyes held something she couldn't read. Something desperate. "Mrs. Harker, please, come with us peacefully. I give you my word, no one will be harmed." "Your word?" Charlotte shook with fury. "Your word is worth nothing, Harry Hatchet. I know what you think of me." Harry interrupted, and his voice broke slightly. His horse shifted again, and he grabbed his saddle horn with his free hand, clearly fighting pain from his damaged hip. His cane swung wildly, nearly falling. "I know what I've done. But right now, in this moment, I'm asking you to trust me one time. Come peacefully. It's your only chance." His whole body was shaking now. Whether from emotion or physical pain, Charlotte couldn't tell. Kangi kept his rifle trained on Harry. "She doesn't go anywhere with you." "Then you all die here," Harry said flatly, though his voice wavered. "Because more men are coming. 6 more riders, maybe 10 minutes behind us. When they arrive, this ravine becomes a shooting gallery, and you can't fight that many. Your choice is simple surrender now and live or refuse and watch her children die." Charlotte looked at her children, Henry burning with fever, Amos crying silently on the sled, Anna whimpering against her chest. She looked at Kanji, saw him calculating odds they couldn't win. She made her decision. "Lower your rifle," she said quietly to Kanji. "Mrs. Harker, lower it, please." She met his eyes. "You've done enough. More than enough. I won't let my children die here because of my stubbornness." "They'll kill you anyway," Kanji said desperately. "Maybe, but maybe not. And maybe is better odds than certain death in this ravine." She touched his arm gently. "Thank you for everything." Kanji stared at her for a long moment. Then slowly he lowered his rifle. Harry exhaled relief washing across his face. His death grip on his cane finally loosened slightly. "Smart choice. Come up here. Slowly." They walked back up the ravine Kangi, supporting Henry, Charlotte carrying Anna. The 2 ranch hands dismounted and grabbed them, roughly binding Charlotte's wrists with rope. "That's not necessary," Harry said sharply, though his voice was weak, now exhausted. "Pike's orders," one of them replied. They tied Kanji's hands as well, ignoring his injured leg. He stood silent and still, but his eyes promised violence to anyone who touched Charlotte or her children. Harry looked at Charlotte one last time. His cane rested across his saddle now, and she saw how badly his left hand trembled. Something moved in his face, regret-guilt conflict warring visibly. His mouth opened as if to speak, then closed again. He looked away. "Mount up," he said quietly. "We ride back to Pike's Ranch." The ride to Pike's Ranch took 3 hours through country Charlotte barely recognized from this new perspective, a prisoner instead of a homesteader. She rode behind one of the ranch hands, her arms aching from being pulled behind her back. Henry rode with Kanji. The boy's feverish body slumped against the warrior's chest. Amos and Anna were strapped to the sled, which was lashed behind Harry's horse. Nobody spoke during the ride. Charlotte used the time to study Harry, the rigid set of his shoulders, the way he favored his left side when the horse's gait jarred his damaged hip, how his right hand kept drifting toward his cane as though seeking comfort. When they finally reached Pike's ranch, Charlotte was struck by the scale of it. The main house was a sprawling structure of timber and stone. Corrals and outbuildings stretched in every direction. Dozens of cattle dotted nearby pastures, visible edges of an empire built on theft. They were pulled from horses roughly and marched into the main house. Charlotte tried to shield her children, but the ranch hands separated them, pushing Amos and Anna into a side room and dragging Henry away from Kanji, despite the boys' weak protests. No. Charlotte screamed, fighting against the ropes. Leave them alone. They're children. Their insurance, said a smooth voice from the doorway. Reginald Pike stepped into the room. He was tall 50s, dressed in expensive clothes, silk vest, tailored coat, polished boots. His face was handsome in a cold way, all sharp angles and calculating eyes. He smiled at Charlotte with perfect teeth. Mrs. Harker, I'm so relieved Sheriff Hatchett found you. These winter storms are terribly dangerous. You could have died out there. You burned my home, Charlotte said, voice shaking with rage. You murdered my husband. Such dramatic accusations. Pike's smile never wavered. Your husband died in an unfortunate accident. The cabin fire was caused by your own carelessness. His eyes were cold as January ice. You're understandably distraught from your ordeal. Perhaps after some rest and proper food, you'll remember events more clearly. I remember perfectly. You want my land for your railroad? You killed Dorian to get it. And when I refused to leave, you tried to burn my children alive. Pike's smile thinned. You have quite an imagination, Mrs. Harker. But imagination doesn't hold up in court. Legal documents do. And I have legal documents showing your late husband borrowed money from me using your land as collateral. The debt is now due. Those documents are forgeries. Prove it. Pike spread his hands. Take me to court if you wish. I'll wait while you hire lawyers with money you don't have, while you find witnesses willing to testify against the largest landowner in the territory, while you explain to a judge why you were running through a blizzard with a Lakota warrior instead of coming to me peacefully. His eyes glittered. How do you think that will go? Charlotte said nothing, because she knew exactly how it would go. Pike nodded. Which brings us to the practical matter at hand. You'll sign papers transferring your land to me. In exchange, I'll forgive the debt, give you $200, and provide safe passage to whatever eastern city you wish. Your children will be unharmed. You'll all start fresh somewhere else. And if I refuse, Pike's smile vanished. Then I'll take the land anyway, through legal channels that will take months and cost you everything. During that time, your children will be placed in the territorial orphanage for their own safety, since their mother is clearly unstable. You'll likely be charged with kidnapping, and your Indian friend will be hanged for taking a white woman captive. The casual cruelty made Charlotte's blood run cold. Your choice is simple, Pike continued. Sign the papers, take the money, leave peacefully, or refuse and watch everything you love be destroyed slowly and legally while you sit helpless in a jail cell. He pulled papers from his coat and laid them on the table. A pen and inkwell appeared beside them. I'll give you 1 hour to decide, Mrs. Harker. Choose wisely. Pike left. The door closed with a solid click. Charlotte heard a lock turn. She was alone with Kanji in a locked room, her children held hostage elsewhere. Kanji worked at his bindings, trying to loosen them. We have to get out of here. Get your children and run. Run where? Charlotte said bitterly. We're surrounded by Pike's men. We're miles from anywhere, and Henry can barely walk. She looked at the papers. Maybe Pike is right. Maybe signing is the only way to keep my children alive. If you sign, he'll kill you anyway, Kangji said flatly. Men like Pike don't leave witnesses. He'll take your land, wait until you're far away, and arrange an accident. You and your children will disappear. Charlotte knew he was right, but she also knew they had no good options left. Then what do we do? She whispered. Before Kangji could answer, the door opened. Charlotte expected Pike, but instead, Sheriff Harry entered alone. He closed the door behind him and stood there not speaking. His cane tapped the floor twice, a nervous gesture. His hand trembled where it gripped the wood. Charlotte glared at him. "Come to gloat, Harry." Harry said nothing for a long moment. His hand tightened on his cane. The tapping grew more rapid, tap, 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 betraying agitation he couldn't hide. Then very quietly, "I can't let you sign those papers." Charlotte stared at him. "What?" Harry looked at the door, then back at Charlotte. His face was torn with conflict. His cane tapped frantically now. "I can't let you sign. If you do, Pike will kill you within a week. He's done it before. I can't." He stopped, swallowed hard. His grip on the cane was white-knuckled. "I can't watch another family die because of me." "Then why did you help him?" Charlotte demanded. "Why did you write accident when Dorian died? Why did you bring forged papers? Why did you watch them burn my home?" "Because I'm a coward," Harry said, voice breaking. His cane trembled so badly it nearly fell from his grip. "Because Pike owns me. Because I took his money years ago when I was desperate. And now he has evidence of every illegal thing I've done. If I cross him, I go to prison. Or I die." He looked at his hands, one clutching the cane, until his knuckles showed bone white, the other hanging loose. "I told myself I was just following orders, that I had no choice, that survival mattered more than conscience. I told myself that lie for so long I almost believed it." His cane tapped 3 times rapidly, the sound sharp in the quiet room. "What changed?" Kangji asked quietly. Harry looked at him, and Charlotte saw his hand tighten convulsively on his cane until it shook. "Your sister, Makawi." The name hit Kangji like a physical blow. "What did you say?" 4 winters ago. A little Lakota girl came to my door during a blizzard. She was begging for help." Harry's voice shook. His cane trembled so badly he had to grip it with both hands. "I heard her knocking. I looked through the window and saw her there, frozen and desperate. And I—" He closed his eyes. "I didn't open up. I was afraid. Afraid of being robbed, afraid of being killed, afraid of wasting firewood. So I sat inside my warm house and listened to her cry, and I did nothing." Tears ran down Harry's weathered face. His cane slipped from his shaking hands and clattered to the floor. "The next morning, I found her frozen on my porch. Her hand was still reaching toward my door. And I knew I had let a child die because I was afraid and selfish." He bent slowly, painfully, to retrieve his cane, and Charlotte saw how badly his damaged leg shook under his weight. "When I saw you running through that blizzard with your children, I saw her again. I saw what I should have done 4 years ago, and I knew I couldn't." He stopped jaw-working. "I couldn't do nothing again." Charlotte stared at him, mind-reeling. "You're the settler, the one who let Makawi die?" "Yes." Harry's voice was barely a whisper. His cane supported his full weight, now trembling. "I'm that man, and I've hated myself every day since." Kangji had gone absolutely still, his face unreadable. For a long moment nobody spoke. Then Kenji said quietly, "Why are you telling us this?" Harry reached into his coat with his free hand and pulled out a small notebook. He laid it on the table beside Pike's papers, then gripped his cane again with both hands, as though it were the only thing keeping him upright. "Because 3 years ago, I started keeping records. Every illegal thing Pike ordered me to do, I wrote down. Dates, names, payments, murder, arson, theft, fraud, every crime documented." He tapped the notebook with one trembling finger. "This is enough to hang Pike 10 times over." Charlotte's heart began to pound. "Why would you keep such records?" "Because I knew one day I would need to choose. Keep serving Pike and lose what little soul I had left, or find courage to do one right thing before I die." Harry looked at her. His cane shook violently in his grip. "That day is today. Take this notebook. Get to Stone Bridge. Give it to Marshal Kane. He's staying at Dr. Klaus's house investigating land disputes. Show him the evidence. He'll arrest Pike. Marshal Kane will arrest you too," Kangi pointed out. "I know." Harry smiled sadly, his whole body trembling now. "I deserve prison. Maybe there I'll finally sleep without seeing Makawi's face every night." He pulled a key from his pocket with shaking fingers and began unlocking Charlotte's bindings. "Your children are in the room at end of hall. There are 2 guards, but they're drunk. Go now while Pike is in his office. Take horses in the North Corral, they're fastest. Ride hard for Stone Bridge. Don't stop for anything." Charlotte rubbed her freed wrists, staring at Harry. "Why should I trust you? How do I know this isn't another trap?" Harry met her eyes. His cane trembled so badly he had to lean all his weight on it. "You don't. But you have no other choice. And for what it's worth, Mrs. Harker, I'm sorry. Sorrier than you'll ever know." He unlocked Kanji's bindings next. The warrior stood slowly, testing his injured leg. "If you're lying," Kanji said quietly, "I'll find you. If I'm lying, you should." Harry opened the door. A crack checked the hallway with obvious difficulty, his leg barely supporting him, then pulled it wide. "Go. Now. Before I lose my nerve." Charlotte grabbed the notebook and ran. Kanji followed, limping but moving fast. They found the room at hall's end. 2 guards sat outside, passing a whiskey bottle exactly as Harry said. Kanji moved like shadow despite his wounded leg. His fist struck the first guard's temple before the man could shout. The second fumbled for his gun, but Kanji kicked it away and hit him hard in the jaw. Both men crumpled. Charlotte threw open the door. Her children were inside, huddled on a narrow bed. Henry looked up with feverish eyes. Amos cried out and ran to her. Anna wailed in a corner cradle. "Mama," Amos sobbed. "I thought they killed you." "I'm here, baby." Charlotte grabbed Anna and pulled Henry to his feet. "We're leaving. Right now. Can you walk?" Henry nodded, though he swayed. They ran through the house, Kanji leading checking corners. They burst out a side door into cold afternoon air. The North Corral was exactly where Harry said. 4 horses stood saddled and ready, as if someone had prepared them deliberately. Harry kept his word. Charlotte whispered. "So far," Kanji said. "But we're not safe yet." Charlotte lifted Amos and Anna onto one horse, tying them securely. Henry climbed onto another with Kanji's help. Charlotte mounted a third, and Kanji took the fourth, despite his failing leg. They were turning toward the gate when a shout rang out. "Riders escaping North Corral." Pike's men poured from the house, guns drawn. Shots cracked through the air. A bullet whined past Charlotte's head, close enough to feel wind. "Ride," Kanji shouted. They kicked horses into a gallop and crashed through the corral gate. More shots followed them, but they were moving fast now. bent low over their horses' necks, racing across open ground toward the tree line. Charlotte looked back once and saw Pike standing on his porch, face twisted with fury. Beside him, Sheriff Harry stood motionless, leaning heavily on his cane, watching them go. Then they were into the trees, and the ranch disappeared behind them. They rode hard for hours, pushing horses to their limits, expecting pursuit at every moment. But the land behind them remained empty. Finally, when the animals were lathered and trembling, Kangji pulled up in a clearing. "We rest," he gasped, sliding from his saddle. His injured leg buckled completely, and he went down hard, barely catching himself. Blood had soaked through the makeshift bandages, darkening his buckskin. Charlotte dismounted and checked her children. Amos was pale but unharmed. Anna cried with exhaustion and hunger. Henry's fever had worsened, his skin burned to the touch, and he barely seemed conscious. "He needs medicine," Charlotte said desperately. "How much farther to Stone Bridge?" "6 hours if we push hard," Kangji said through gritted teeth, trying unsuccessfully to stand. His legs simply wouldn't support weight anymore. "Can he make it?" Charlotte looked at her son's flushed face. "He has to." They mounted again, after 10 minutes too soon, but they had no choice. Kangji could barely pull himself into the saddle, his injured leg dangling uselessly. But he rode on, jaw clenched against pain that must have been excruciating. As darkness fell, they climbed into hills, following ridges north. Behind them, no pursuit. No sounds of horses, nothing but wind and their own ragged breathing. "Something's wrong," Kangji said quietly. "Pike should have sent men after us by now." Charlotte felt ice form in her stomach. "What do you mean?" "Harry gave us horses a clear path, time to escape. Either he's genuinely helping us," Kangji trailed off, face grim, "or he's herding us exactly where Pike wants us to go." Charlotte's hand tightened on the reins. She thought about Harry's trembling hands, his desperate eyes, his broken voice. Had it all been performance? Was she riding into another trap? But what choice did they have? Henry was dying. They had nowhere else to go. "We keep going," she said. "To Stone Bridge, to this Marshal Kane. It's our only chance." Kangji nodded, though doubt lingered in his eyes. Around midnight, they stopped again. Henry was delirious now, mumbling incoherently. Charlotte held him while he shook with chills despite his burning skin. Amos had fallen asleep on his horse, exhausted beyond endurance. Anna's cries had weakened to pitiful mewling. "How much farther?" Charlotte whispered. 3 hours if we don't stop." Charlotte looked at her son, at Kangji barely able to sit upright, at their exhausted horses. "We keep going," she said, "no matter what." They mounted one final time and rode through the last hours of darkness, too tired to speak, too desperate to stop. The world narrowed to putting one hoof before another, staying in the saddle, refusing to fall. As dawn began to gray the eastern sky, they topped a rise, and Charlotte saw it, a town spread in the valley below. Smoke rising from morning fires, buildings lined along a main street. Stone Bridge. They'd made it. They rode into Stone Bridge as sun rose, 4 exhausted riders on spent horses looking like refugees from hell itself. People stopped to stare. A woman gasped. 2 men hurried toward them. "Where is Dr. Klaus?" Charlotte asked, voice hoarse. "Big house at end of street," one man said, pointing. "White with green shutters. But what happened to—" "Thank you." Charlotte didn't wait for more questions. They rode to the house indicated, and she practically fell from her saddle, carrying Anna up the steps. Kangji helped Henry down, barely able to stand himself. Charlotte pounded on the door. It opened to reveal an older man with kind eyes and graying beard. He took one look at them and stepped aside immediately. "Come in quickly. I'm Dr. Evander Klaus. Your children need care." He led Henry to a side room and began examining him with quick efficiency. Charlotte stood beside them, holding Anna, watching desperately as Klaus checked Henry's breathing, his pulse, his temperature. Severe pneumonia, high fever. Klaus began mixing medicines. "This will help, but he needs rest. Days of it." He looked at Charlotte properly for the first time, and his eyes widened. "You're Charlotte Harker, the widow whose cabin burned. Some folks thought Pike killed you." He tried. Charlotte pulled Harry's notebook from her coat with trembling hands. "This has evidence of everything Pike has done. Years of crimes documented by Sheriff Hatchett. I need to give this to Marshal Kane. Is he here?" Klaus's expression darkened. "Marshal Kane? Yes, he's in my back room. Been here 2 days recovering from illness." Something flickered in his eyes, concern perhaps, or warning. "I'll take you to him." Klaus led Charlotte and Kangji through the house. They entered a back room where a man in his 40s lay in bed, propped on pillows. Despite obvious illness, he had sharp eyes that assessed them quickly. "Mrs. Harker?" he asked. "Yes." "Are you Marshal Kane?" "I am." He sat up straighter. "And you have evidence against Reginald Pike?" "Yes." Charlotte held up the notebook. "Sheriff Harry Hatchett gave this to me. 3 years of documented crimes, murders, arsons, frauds, everything." She laid the notebook on the marshal's lap. Kane opened it and began reading. His expression remained neutral, professional, giving nothing away. After several minutes, he looked up. "This is comprehensive. Sheriff Hatchett documented everything." He closed the notebook. "Mrs. Harker, I need you to tell me exactly what happened. How you got this, why you trusted everything." Something in his tone made Charlotte's skin prickle, but she was too exhausted, too desperate to question it. She told him everything: Dorian's death, Pike's threats, the fire, the blizzard, Kangji's rescue, Harry's conflicted help, their escape from Pike's ranch. Kane listened without interrupting. When she finished, he nodded slowly. "This evidence is certainly damning if it's genuine," he said. "But I'll need to verify it, cross-reference the claims, ensure it wasn't fabricated. These things take time." "We don't have time," Charlotte said desperately. "Pike's men are probably already searching for us. If they find us before you arrest him..." "I understand your fear, Mrs. Harker. But the law requires proper procedure. I can't simply arrest the largest rancher in the territory based on an unverified notebook. Surely you understand that." Charlotte stared at him. Something was wrong. A federal marshal investigating land crimes should have been eager for this evidence, should have been preparing arrest warrants, not talking about verification and procedure. "Marshal," she said slowly, "when did you arrive in Stonebridge?" 2 days ago. Why do you ask?" "And you came here investigating what exactly?" Kane's eyes narrowed slightly. "General complaints about land disputes." Why all these questions, Mrs. Harker? Kangji had gone very still beside Charlotte. His hand moved slowly toward the knife at his belt. "Because," Charlotte said, her voice hardening, "Harry told me you arrived yesterday, not 2 days ago. Yesterday." Silence fell in the room, heavy and cold. Kane's expression didn't change, but something shifted behind his eyes. His hand moved beneath the blanket. "Mrs. Harker," he said quietly, "you're confused? Exhausted from your ordeal? You've misremembered what Sheriff Hatchett told you." "No." Charlotte took a step back. "I haven't. You're not Marshal Kane. Who are you?" The man smiled, thin, cold smile that never reached his eyes. His hand emerged from beneath the blanket, holding a revolver cocked and aimed directly at Charlotte's chest. "My name is Frank Brennan," he said. "I was a marshal once 10 years ago before Pike bought me. Now I'm just a man doing a job." He swung the gun to point at Kanji. "Both of you hands where I can see them. Now." Charlotte's blood turned to ice. They'd walked directly into Pike's trap. "The notebook," Brennan said. "Put it on the table, slowly." Charlotte didn't move. "Harry told us to come here. He sent us to you deliberately. This was all planned." "Of course it was planned," Brennan said with something like amusement. "Harry's been playing both sides for months, pretending to have a crisis of conscience. Pike needed him to gain your trust, make you believe you had hope, lead you exactly where we wanted you. And you walked right in." He gestured with the gun. "The notebook. Now, or I shoot the Indian first, then I walk upstairs and put bullets in your children's heads." "You wouldn't," Charlotte started. "I would, and I have. Pike pays well for wet work." Brennan's finger tightened on the trigger. "Last chance." Charlotte looked at Kanji. His face was carved from stone, but his eyes promised violence. He was calculating distance, weighing odds. Could he reach Brennan before the gun fired? The answer was no. They were trapped. Charlotte's hand moved toward the notebook. The window exploded inward in a shower of glass. Brennan spun toward the sound gun tracking, and Kanji moved. Despite his ruined leg, despite exhaustion, he lunged forward with shocking speed, his knife flashing from its sheath. The blade took Brennan in the shoulder before the man could fire. Brennan screamed, and the revolver discharged the shot, going wild, plaster exploding from the ceiling. He staggered back, blood spreading across his shirt. Kanji collapsed, his leg finally giving out completely. He fell hard, barely conscious from pain and blood loss. Charlotte grabbed the revolver from where it had fallen and pointed it at Brennan with shaking hands. The fake marshal clutched his wounded shoulder, his face twisted with rage and pain. "Dr. Klaus!" Charlotte screamed. "Help, we need—" The door burst open, but it wasn't Klaus. Reginald Pike stood in the doorway, flanked by 4 armed men. His face was calm, almost pleasant, as though he'd expected this exact scene. "Mrs. Harker," he said smoothly, "I must say you've been far more trouble than anticipated. But it's over now." He nodded to his men. "Take them. Kill the Indian. The woman and children we'll deal with more carefully." Pike's men moved into the room, guns drawn. And Charlotte realized with sick certainty that they were going to die here. All of them. She'd fought so hard, survived so much, and it was going to end in this small room in Stone Bridge, murdered by Pike's men while the fake marshal watched. She looked at Kanji, bleeding and barely conscious, on the floor. At the notebook on the table, all that evidence useless now. At the door where her children slept upstairs, unaware their mother was about to die. One of Pike's men grabbed Charlotte's arm. She struggled, but he was far stronger, twisting the revolver from her grip. Another moved toward Kanji, rifle pointed at his head. "Wait," Pike said, his voice carrying absolute authority. The men stopped. Pike walked slowly into the room, his eyes on the notebook. "Is that Hatchett's evidence?" "Yes." Brennan gasped, still clutching his shoulder. "She brought it directly to me, just like you said she would." Pike picked up the notebook, thumbed through it with casual interest. 3 years of meticulous documentation. Poor Harry. He actually thought this would make a difference. Pike looked at Charlotte. "He convinced you I sent him to help, didn't he? Made you believe he'd found his conscience. When really I ordered him to gain your trust, to make you feel you had allies, so you'd lead me to any evidence he'd hidden away. And you did exactly that." Charlotte felt the last of her hope crumble into ash. "Harry was working for you the whole time." "Not the whole time," He did try to betray me, initially went to the territorial authorities with his little notebook. But I have friends in high places, Mrs. Harker. I learned about his betrayal before it could damage me. I gave Harry a simple choice: continue playing his role as my reluctant conscience helped me find and destroy all evidence against me, or watch his sister hang for a murder I'd carefully frame her for. Pike smiled. Harry chose his sister. Family is so important, don't you think? Charlotte's mind reeled. Everything Harry had done, the trembling hands, the desperate eyes, the notebook, the escape, all of it had been designed to lead her here, to give Pike exactly what he wanted. Now, Pike said, tucking the notebook into his coat, "We'll make this look like the Indian killed you in a violent rage, then was shot by my men while trying to escape. A tragic end to your sad story." He nodded to his men. "Do it." The man holding Charlotte jerked her backward, pulling her off balance. The one standing over Kangji raised his rifle finger, tightening on the trigger. Gunfire erupted from the doorway. But not from Pike's men. One of Pike's guards crumpled, blood blooming across his chest. Another spun and fell shot through the throat. The remaining two dove for cover, returning fire at targets Charlotte couldn't see. Through the doorway burst federal marshals, real ones this time, unmistakable in their uniforms and badges. 6 men moving with military precision, guns blazing. And leading them was Sheriff Harry Hatchett, limping badly, but moving fast, his revolver smoking in his hand. "Federal marshals," Harry shouted. "Drop your weapons, Pike, you're under arrest." Chaos erupted. Pike's remaining men opened fire. Bullets smashed through furniture, walls, windows. Charlotte threw herself flat, covering her head. Glass showered down, wood splintered, the air filled with gun smoke and the deafening crack of rifles. One of Pike's men fell, hit multiple times. The other made a run for the back door and was cut down before he'd gone 3 steps. Pike himself dove behind an overturned table, pulling a derringer from his vest. He fired twice at the marshals, missed, then looked around desperately for escape. There was none. The shooting stopped as suddenly as it had started. Ringing silence fell, broken only by groans from wounded men and the sound of boots on broken glass. Harry moved into the room, his damaged leg barely supporting him. His cane nowhere to be seen. Blood ran from a cut on his temple where a bullet had grazed him. But his eyes were clear, focused, and his gun never wavered as he approached Pike's hiding place. "It's over, Reginald," Harry said quietly. "Come out, slowly." Pike rose from behind the table, his face twisted with rage. "You dare betray me, Harry, after everything I know about you." "Tell them," Harry said. "Tell everyone what you know. I don't care anymore. I'm done carrying your sins along with my own." A tall man in a marshal's uniform entered the real Marshal Kane. Charlotte realized seeing the authentic star on his chest. He surveyed the carnage with cold, professional eyes. "Reginald Pike," Kane said, voice carrying absolute authority. "You're under arrest for murder, arson, theft, fraud, conspiracy, and attempted murder of a federal witness. Your men are dead or captured. Your empire is finished." Pike's face went white, then red, with impotent fury. "This is illegal. I have rights. I have lawyers." "Save your breath," Kane said. "You'll speak to the judge soon enough, and he will listen." He nodded to his men. "Take him." Federal marshals moved in, shackling Pike's wrists and ankles. He fought, screaming about influential friends, about how they couldn't do this, about how he'd destroy them all. But it was the rage of a man watching everything he'd built collapse around him, and it changed nothing. They dragged him from the room, still screaming threats that rang hollow now. Charlotte lay on the floor, too stunned to move. Around her, marshals secured the scene, checking bodies, binding Brennan's wound, calling for Dr. Klaus. Harry limped over to where she lay and extended his hand, the same hand that had been trembling so badly just hours ago now. steady despite the blood running down his face. "Mrs. Harker," he said quietly, "are you hurt?" Charlotte stared at his hand, at this man who had let Macaulay die, who had helped Pike terrorize the territory, who had just saved her life. "I don't understand," she whispered. "Pike said you were working for him, that you led me into a trap." "I was working for him," Harry said. His voice was flat, exhausted. "For 3 months after he caught me trying to betray him. He threatened my sister. She's all the family I have left. So I did what he wanted. I helped him find evidence, helped him set traps." He looked at Kangji, who was being tended by Klaus now. "But I also sent word to the real Marshal Kane, told him everything, arranged for him to be here when Pike came for you." Charlotte's mind spun. "The notebook is a copy. I made 3. Pike has one. You have one. Marshal Kane has one locked in territorial headquarters." Harry's hand remained extended. "I couldn't tell you. Pike was watching too closely. I had to make him believe I was still his creature, had to let you think I'd betrayed you so he'd walk into this trap thinking he'd won." His voice broke slightly. "I'm sorry I couldn't warn you. Sorry you had to be bait." Charlotte looked at his hand for a long moment. Then slowly she took it and let him help her to her feet. "Your sister?" she asked. "Safe. Marshal Kane moved her to protective custody last week before any of this began. Pike never knew." Harry released her hand and stepped back. "Mrs. Harker, I won't insult you by asking forgiveness. I know what I am, what I've done. But I want you to know I meant what I said in Pike's house. I am tired. Tired of being afraid. Tired of watching children suffer because I'm too weak to help them." He looked toward where Kangji lay. "I can't bring back your husband. Can't undo Macaui's death. But I could do this. I could help end Pike. It's not redemption. It's not enough. But it's what I have." Charlotte had no words. She looked at this broken man who had failed so catastrophically, and then found courage in the wreckage of his own cowardice, and felt something complicated twist in her chest. Not forgiveness. Not yet, maybe not ever. But recognition that people were more than their worst moments, that choosing differently, even late, even after terrible failure, mattered. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for what you did today." Harry nodded, accepting that small grace. Then he turned and limped from the room, leaving her standing amid the destruction. The real Marshal Kane approached Charlotte. "Mrs. Harker, I need your statement. Everything that happened from the beginning. My children are safe upstairs with Dr. Klaus's wife. They slept through the gunfight." Kane's expression softened slightly. "Your son's fever is breaking. Klaus says he'll recover with rest." Relief hit Charlotte so hard she nearly fell. Kane caught her elbow, steadied her. "Sit," he said gently. "We have time. Pike isn't going anywhere." Pike's trial began 2 weeks later. By then, Henry had recovered enough to walk, though he tired easily. Charlotte had testified before a grand jury, which took 3 days and left her exhausted. Kangji had testified as well, his legs slowly healing under Klaus's careful treatment. The trial itself was brief. With 3 copies of Harry's notebook testimony from Charlotte and Kangji evidence from other victims who came forward once Pike was jailed, and Harry's own detailed testimony, the case was overwhelming. Pike's expensive lawyers tried every tactic, claimed the evidence was fabricated, attacked witnesses' credibility, suggested Pike was being framed by business rivals. Nothing worked. The evidence was too solid, too detailed, too corroborated by too many independent sources. The jury deliberated for 2 hours. When they returned, the foreman stood and spoke clearly. "We find the defendant, Reginald Pike, guilty on all counts." Pike was sentenced to hang. His lawyers filed appeals, but those were denied. His assets were seized and sold. Charlotte received $1,500 in restitution, enough to rebuild, start fresh. Harry was sentenced separately. Despite his cooperation and the evidence he provided, he had committed serious crimes over years. The judge gave him 5 years in territorial prison, with possibility of early release after 3 years with good behavior. The day before Harry was transported, Charlotte visited him one final time. They sat on opposite sides of the jail's barred door. Harry's hands rested on his knees, no longer trembling. His cane leaned against the wall beside him. He'd needed it to walk here, but now he just sat looking older than his years. "Your son is well?" Harry asked quietly. "Yes. Dr. Klaus says he'll make a full recovery." "Good. That's good." Harry looked at his hands. "Mrs. Harker, I know I don't deserve, but I wanted you to know. What I told you in Pike's house about Makawi, that was true. Every word. I did let her die because I was afraid. And seeing you in that storm, seeing your children, it was like God giving me one chance to choose differently. To be the man I should have been 4 years ago." Charlotte studied his face at the lines carved by guilt, the exhaustion of carrying shame for so long. Did it help choosing differently? Harry was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know yet. Ask me in 3 years when I've served my time. Maybe by then I'll have an answer." Charlotte nodded. She stood to leave, then paused. "Harry, for what it's worth, I believe you tried to be better. That matters." Harry looked up, something like hope flickering in his eyes. "Does it?" "Yes," Charlotte said, and meant it. Spring came. Charlotte rebuilt her cabin with help from Stonebridge residents. Kangji stayed helping with construction, teaching Henry and Amos skills their father would have taught them. The territory healed slowly, Pike's reign of terror fading into cautionary tale. One evening in May, as sun set gold over mountains, Kangji helped Charlotte plant her garden. The children played near the creek. Peace settled over the land like a blessing. "Will you stay?" Charlotte asked quietly. "Here in this territory?" Kangji looked at her, his dark eyes steady. "My family's camp is 2 days north. I visit them often. But I've been thinking about building closer to town, somewhere I could live year-round." He paused. "Somewhere I could visit a certain homesteader without riding 2 days each direction." Charlotte felt warmth bloom in her chest. That homesteader would welcome such visits. "Only the homesteader?" Kangji asked, the corner of his mouth lifting. "Not only," Charlotte said softly. They stood in comfortable silence, watching sunset paint impossible colors across the sky. After a moment, Kangji's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining naturally. It wasn't dramatic. No grand declarations. Just two people who had survived horror together, beginning to imagine a future that held something besides pain. 2 years later, Charlotte stood on her porch, watching snow fall softly through twilight. Inside, children laughed, Henry and Amos and Anna, and the new baby Sarah, born last summer, with her mother's brown hair and her father's dark eyes. Through the snow, Charlotte saw a figure approaching, a woman stumbling, carrying an infant, clearly in distress. Without hesitation, Charlotte grabbed her coat and walked into the snow. She found the woman collapsed in a drift, clutching a baby to her chest, both half frozen. Charlotte knelt beside her, touched her shoulder gently. "Come with me," she said. "You're safe now." The woman looked up with terrified eyes. Then she reached out her hand. Charlotte helped her to her feet and led her back toward the light of the homestead, where warmth waited and help was freely given. Because that was what she and Kanji had built together. That was the legacy of that night in the blizzard, when a stranger chose mercy over fear. Years passed. Charlotte and Kanji grew old together, their hair graying, their hands weathered. But they never forgot the lesson learned in that storm, that one choice made in a moment of compassion could echo forward through time. When Charlotte died peacefully, at 73, surrounded by children and grandchildren, people came from across the territory to honor her. They told stories of courage and justice. But mostly they told stories of mercy freely given. Kanji, now an old man, stood beside his wife's grave and spoke in both Lakota and English. She taught me that fear is not stronger than love, that one person choosing courage can change everything. He looked at the gathered crowd. My sister died because someone chose fear. Charlotte lived because I chose differently. From that one choice, all of this became possible. He paused, his old eyes sweeping across faces, children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, friends, neighbors, people of every background. Don't let her death end what she started. Help the stranger in the storm. Speak truth when silence is easier. Stand beside those who cannot stand alone. Charlotte was buried on a hillside, overlooking the homestead she'd fought to keep. Her gravestone bore a simple inscription, Charlotte Harker Dusk Runner, 1844, 1917. She chose mercy. Years later, another winter night brought another blizzard. Through the white, a figure stumbled, desperate, dying alone. An old man walked into that storm without hesitation, extended his hand, and said words he'd said so many years before. Come with me. Because some choices once made never end. They echo forward through generations, carried by people who remember what it means to offer mercy when mercy costs everything. The wind howled outside, fierce and cold and unrelenting. But inside the homestead that Charlotte built and Kanji protected and their children inherited, warmth and light endured. As they always had, as they always would.